tape, imagine a row of squares that goes on forever in both directions. Each square can hold one symbol from a finite alphabet sigma, for example 0, 1 blank, where blank means a blank. Head, this is the robot's hand that can read the symbol on the square it stands on, write a new symbol, and then move one step left, L, or right. R, the hand always stays on exactly one square. Control unit, finite state controller. Think of a small brain with a finite set of states Q equals Q0, Q1, Q accept, Q reject. In each state, the brain looks at the symbol under the head and, according to a rule, decides three things: which symbol to write, which direction to move, and which state to go to next. Formally, a Turing machine is a 7-tuple M equals Q, sigma, gamma, delta, Q sub 0, Q accept, Q reject, where gamma, the tape alphabet, contains sigma and the blank symbol blank. Delta maps Q cross gamma to Q cross gamma cross L or R, and is the transition function. Q0 is the start state, Q accept and Q reject are the halting states. This definition captures a machine that can do any computation a modern computer can, given enough time and tape. A configuration records everything the TM knows at a single moment: the current state, the whole contents of the tape, and the position of the head. We write it as a triple Q comma U underline a V, where the underline marks the cell the head is on. U is the string left of the head, O is the symbol being read, and V is the string to the right. The transition function delta tells how one configuration changes into the next. If delta of Q comma A equals P comma B comma right, then the machine writes B over A, moves the head right, and enters state P. The sequence of configurations C0 arrow C1 arrow C2, and so on is called a computation. The semantics are simple. Start in Q0 underline blank with the input written on the tape, then repeatedly apply delta until a halting state Q accept or Q reject is reached. If the machine never reaches a halting state, the computation is infinite. The machine does not decide the input. Language L1 equals set of A to the NB to the N such that N greater than or equal to 1. The same number of A's followed by the same number of B's. The machine scans right to find the first A, replaces it with X as a marker, then moves right to find the first unmarked B, replaces it with Y, and returns to the leftmost X. It repeats this process until no A's remain. If it reaches a B before all A's are marked, it rejects. After marking all A's, if only Y's and blanks are seen, it accepts. For palindromes, the Turing machine marks the leftmost symbol. For example, 0 becomes X, 1 becomes Y, then walks to the far right end, checks that the same symbol appears, marks it, and returns to the left side. It repeats this until the whole tape is marked or only one symbol remains. If any mismatch occurs, it rejects. These constructions illustrate that a Turing machine can compare distant parts of the input, something a simpler finite automaton cannot do because the Turing machine has the tape as memory. When we design a TM, we often draw a state diagram similar to a flowchart. Each circle is a state, each arrow is labeled with a three-part instruction: read/write/move. For example, an arrow labeled a /x, R means, if the head sees an A, write X, move right, and go to the arrow's destination state. The diagram shows all possible actions the robot can take. Tape operations are expressed by the right symbols and the direction L or R. By following the arrows step by step, we can simulate the machine on paper. This visual method helps beginners see how the head walks back and forth, how markers like X and Y are used to remember what has been processed, and where the machine finally stops. There are many variants of the basic TM, but they all have the same power. They recognize exactly the same languages, the recursively enumerable languages. Multitape TM, imagine several tapes side by side, each with its own head. The transition function now looks at the symbols under all heads, and can write on each tape and move each head independently. We can simulate a multitape TM with a single tape TM by interleaving the contents of the tapes onto one long tape, using special separator symbols. The simulation only slows down by a polynomial factor, so both models accept the same languages. Non-deterministic TM, NTM. At a given configuration, the machine may have several possible moves. Delta returns a set of triples. The NTM accepts if any branch reaches an accepting state. A deterministic TM can simulate an NTM by systematically exploring all branches, for example breadth-first search, using extra work tape. Again, the class of languages stays the same. Semi-infinite tape. The tape starts at a leftmost cell and goes infinitely to the right. The head is never allowed to move left of the start. This model is also equivalent because we can encode a two-way infinite tape on a semi-infinite tape by pairing cells. Odd positions store left side, even positions store right side. A universal Turing machine, abbreviated UTM, is like a general-purpose computer that can run any other TM when given a description of that machine and its input. To do this, we need a way to encode a TM as a string of symbols. One common method is Gödel numbering. Assign a unique natural number to every symbol, state, and transition, then list the numbers in a fixed order and separate them with a delimiter, for example 0. The whole list becomes a binary string that the UTM can read from its own tape. The UTM then interprets this description. It simulates the target machine step by step, using its own tape as the simulated tape. This shows that a single machine can perform any computable algorithm, just like modern computers running different programs. A language is decidable or recursive if there exists a TM that always halts and correctly says yes except or no reject for every input. For example, the language of strings with an even number of zeros is decidable. A simple TM just toggles a state while scanning. An undecidable language has no such TM. The classic example is the halting problem. H equals open angle bracket M comma W close angle bracket such that M halts on input W. Using a diagonal argument construction, we prove that if a TM could decide H, we could build a paradoxical machine that both halts and does not halt a contradiction. By reducing H to other problems, for example, whether a TM accepts a string, we prove many natural problems are undecidable. These proofs rely on encoding machines and inputs, as strings the same technique used for the UTM. When we talk about complexity, we ask not just whether a TM can solve a problem, but how much resource it uses. Two main resources are time, the number of transition steps before the machine halts. If a TM uses at most t of n steps on every input of length n, we say it runs in time t of n. Classes such as p, polynomial time, contain languages that have a TM whose time is bounded by a polynomial n to the space, the number of tape cells that are ever visited or written on. If the TM uses at most s of n cells, it runs in space s of n. Classes like p space contain languages solvable with polynomial space, regardless of time. These measures let us compare algorithms just as we compare cooking recipes by how many minutes or how many bowls they need. Complexity theory studies the trade-offs and the limits of efficient computation. Explanation: to feed a TM a description of another TM or even its own description, we need a systematic way to turn symbols and states into a string of zeros and ones. Gödel numbering assigns each basic element a unique natural number. For example, state Q0 maps to 1, state Q1 maps to 2, symbol A maps to 3, blank maps to 4, direction left maps to 5, right maps to 6. A transition of state Qi reading A goes to state Qj writing B and moving direction D becomes a tuple of I, a J, B, D. We then encode the tuple by writing each number in binary, separating them by a special separator, say 0. All transitions are concatenated preceded by a header that lists the sets Q, sigma, gamma, and the start except reject states. The whole result is a binary string M. The same idea works for inputs. We simply write the input symbols in binary. Because the encoding is computable, a TM can read any encoded machine or input, decode it, and act accordingly. The backbone of the universal machine and of proofs about decidability.